Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Hey there.
Today, we're tackling a subject right at the heart of many relationships, but one that's often, well, danced around a bit.
Intimacy within marriage.
Yeah. And our source for this exploration is Lucille Williams' book, The Intimacy You Crave, Straight Talk About Sex and Pancakes.
That title certainly gets your attention.
It does.
And the book itself, it's really resonated with people because it's so candid, refreshingly so, and often humorous, about something that can feel, off limits.
Especially within faith communities sometimes.
Exactly. It really digs into both sides, the physical and the emotional aspects of intimacy in marriage. And what's interesting is the feedback. People consistently say how relatable it is, how honest, and how it kind of fills this void in open conversations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So our goal for you, our listener, is really to pull out the key insights, the practical stuff from this book.
Yeah, hopefully helping you build a richer, more fulfilling connection with your spouse.
And we'll try to make it feel, clear and manageable, not overwhelming.
Okay, so where do we start this deep dive?
Well, right off the bat, the book hammers home the absolute necessity of open communication.
Okay.
The author shares this pretty awkward personal story from a Bible study. Something about a fighter pilot.
Oh, I remember reading that. Cringeworthy.
Totally. And it just perfectly throws into sharp relief how hesitant we can be, culturally almost, to discuss anything even remotely sexual, even in contexts where it should be okay.
That story says so much, doesn't it? It
Yeah.
really highlights how deep that taboo runs.
But what's great is how the author uses that very discomfort as a launch pad. She just dives into a direct, unapologetic conversation about sex within marriage.
Sort of saying, okay, let's get over the awkwardness because this is important.
Precisely. Her point is that silence just isn't serving couples well. Spouses need to be able to talk openly with each other about this stuff.
And clearly that message hit a nerve. The book mentions Camille's story. Right. And the huge response she got from women who were just desperate to talk about sex in their marriages.
It really makes you realize how many people are quietly struggling, maybe even in, basically sexless marriages.
Yeah, the prevalence is kind of startling when you see that response.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder about the ripple effects on the whole relationship.
For sure.
And then there's that anecdote about the pastor's wife.
Oh, the disappointing wedding night.
Yes. It just further illustrates how critical better preparation is, but maybe even more so, that ongoing open dialogue right from the start of a marriage.
Makes you think about what conversations maybe don't happen early on.
Definitely. But, the book isn't just about the struggles. It offers a really hopeful message, too, especially for couples who've been married a long time.
That it's not too late.
Exactly. It really emphasizes that it's never too late to cultivate deeper intimacy. It just takes, well, intentional effort, patience, and, like the title says, being willing to learn.
And it frames this within a spiritual context too, right?
Yeah.
Referencing Hebrews.
Yeah, Hebrews 13.4, about honoring the marriage bed. The author even playfully suggests couples can become, like, experts in their own marital intimacy through dedication.
I love that. Becoming an expert in your own marriage's intimacy.
It shifts the perspective, doesn't it? From something passive to something you actively build together.
It's a direct challenge to that whole shh, don't talk about such things mentality.
Totally pushing back against that.
Yeah.
And another key insight is the link the book makes between handling conflict and the health of your physical intimacy.
How so?
It suggests that when you learn to navigate disagreements with selflessness and trust, kind of like the principles in Romans 12, it actually strengthens the whole bond.
Including the passion.
Including the passion, yeah.
Yeah.
Tackling conflict together builds that foundation.
Okay, so open communication is groundwork number one. But what gets in the way? What are the common roadblocks?
The book lays out several common hindrances. It uses this fictional couple, Hannah and Steve, to make it really relatable.
Right, I remember them.
And their situation highlights things like just sheer exhaustion, right? Unspoken desires kind of simmering under the surface.
Or just not communicating those desires.
Exactly. And simply not carving out the time or space for connection. All that stuff can seriously erode sexual intimacy.
That scene where Hannah's just drained and Steve doesn't quite get why she's not interested, that felt very real.
It did. But what was also encouraging was Steve's reaction when Hannah finally did bring it up.
Yeah, he was open, supportive.
Right, which really shows the power of just starting the conversation, even if it feels vulnerable or awkward.
Often the fear of the conversation is worse than the conversation itself.
So true. Even though Hannah was nervous, Steve's willingness to just listen, to engage, that made all the difference. Breaking the silence is often the biggest hurdle.
So the book then lists what, a top 10 hindrances?
Yeah, a top 10 hindrances to intimacy. And for today, maybe we can dive deeper into two that seem particularly common. Body image and the impact of past sexual abuse.
Okay, let's start with body image. That feels almost universal, especially for women.
Absolutely. The author is very open about how widespread body image issues are and how they can really inhibit, sexual expression and confidence in a marriage. She even shares her own struggles with weight gain after having kids.
That honesty makes it so much easier to connect with, doesn't it?
Definitely. And the book does this fascinating little historical detour.
Oh, yeah, showing how the ideal female body has changed so much.
Exactly. From like the Venus of Willendorf, all curves, to Renaissance figures, then Gibson girls, flappers, Marilyn Monroe, supermodels.
Art, it keeps changing.
Totally. It really drives home how arbitrary these media portrayals are and how kind of mad it is to constantly compare ourselves to these shifting ideals.
That historical look really puts it in perspective. This perfect body is just whatever culture decides it is at the moment.
And the book brings in a husband's view, too, quoting a guy named Gabe, who talks about appreciating his wife's extra junk.
Huh. I remember that quote. It's a good reminder that our partners often aren't zeroed in on the same flaws we see.
Not at all. What usually matters more is the connection, the intimacy itself, not hitting some impossible physical standard. The book really pushes for shifting focus,
From flaws to
appreciating the beautiful aspects of your own body, and consciously deciding to actually believe the compliments your husband gives you.
Ooh, that's a big one. Believing the compliments.
It is, and redefining perfect as simply your body, the one your spouse loves and desires. There's also a great point from Dr. Kevin Lemonin
What's that?
that often, for men, a wife's willing and enthusiastic attitude is way more important than specific physical attributes. It's pretty freeing, right?
That takes a huge weight off, yeah. And the advice is pretty direct, isn't it? Like, let him have it.
Yeah, don't let body image issues make you withdraw or freeze them out. Don't let those insecurities build a wall right there in the bedroom. Lock them out.
Okay, now shifting gears to a much heavier topic, sexual abuse.
Yes, a deeply painful reality. The book handles it with a lot of sensitivity, acknowledging the potential for long-term impact on intimacy.
And the author shares her own story.
She does, very bravely. Her journey of acknowledging it, sharing it with her husband, with trusted friends, and how that became her path to healing and freedom.
That takes incredible courage. And then there's Jessica's story.
Right, about the childhood abuse by her brother. It really illustrates the lasting shadow these experiences can cast on adult intimacy, even with a loving husband.
But her husband, Victor, his response was key, wasn't it?
Hugely supportive.
Yeah.
Understanding. His empathy was crucial. And his grandmother's advice.
What was that again?
Something like, anything shared privately and lovingly between a husband and wife is a blessing from God. It directly counters the shame and secrecy that so often cling to abuse survivors.
That's powerful, challenging the shame.
Exactly. The book stresses confronting the truth, breaking free from secrets, and the absolute importance of telling someone trusted. That night of healing example where women shared stories.
Sounds like it would be incredibly powerful.
Yeah, the power of community, of shared experience in healing. The book is clear. Abuse is a violation, a perversion of God's design for intimacy.
And the path to healing involves...
Acknowledging it, giving it to God, nurturing that wounded inner child. And forgiveness is presented as crucial.
forgiving the abuser, but also yourself.
Yes, forgiving yourself for any misplaced blame, and relying on God's provision, Jehovah Jireh, for healing and restoration. It's a journey.
Okay, so after tackling those hindrances, the book shifts perspective a bit, right? To understanding his side.
Yeah, understanding his sexuality. It uses this clever device, a day in the life of a husband, Mr. John Johnson.
Right, two different versions of his day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Scenario one. He has a decent day, maybe even a win at work, comes home, and feels kind of invisible.
Like his wife's more into her phone or ordering pizza than really connecting.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Then scenario two shows the opposite. His wife is attentive, shows appreciation, simple acts of love.
And it completely changes his experience.
Dramatically. His feelings about coming home, his desire to connect. It's a stark contrast.
Really highlights the impact of just acknowledging him, appreciating him, instead of maybe focusing on the little irritations.
Spot on. The book suggests that for many men, those physical and emotional needs for connection are really tightly linked. Feeling valued by his wife fuels that.
And it encourages actually talking to your husband about this stuff.
Definitely. Don't assume. Ask him, how often does he think about you?
Hmm.
about sex. What does he desire? Initiate that conversation.
Which flows nicely into the next bit. Men are visual.
Right. It quotes Patrick saying it's not about looking like a model, but taking care of yourself, having pride in your appearance. That does matter.
And there was that survey data from Stephen Arterburn.
Yeah, showing many men do notice and care about their wife's appearance, but they're often really hesitant to bring it up.
Interesting communication gap there.
It is, and the author gets personal again, talking about her own weight gain.
And how her behavior changed when she started feeling better about herself?
Exactly. It wasn't just about his perception. It was about her confidence, how she carried herself. And that had a positive ripple effect on his attraction, on their whole dynamic.
So making an effort, even with clothes or lingerie, it's not just superficial.
Not according to the book. Carlos is, quote, feeling good when his wife looks good reinforces that visual element. It's about creating desire, giving him something tantalizing to look at, a reason to want to hurry home.
And it gets pretty practical with suggestions.
Oh, yeah. Lingerie, being mindful of how you bend over, maybe dressing in front of him sometimes. Playful ways to be visually engaging, build anticipation.
Okay. But what if the issue isn't her effort, but his lack of interest? The book tackles that too, right?
It does, under the heading, When His Engine is on Idle.
This is so important because it challenges that stereotype that men are always ready for sex.
Acknowledging that men can have low libido too.
Absolutely. And it urges wives not to jump to conclusions like an affair or something, but to ask the tough questions.
Yeah.
Dig a little deeper.
What kind of reasons does it explore? Several possibilities. Hurt feelings. Dr. Lavin pops up again saying men can be more sensitive than we realize.
Okay.
Breaching trust, maybe by oversharing intimate details with friends. Embarrassment or insecurity about, performance. Or even feeling manipulated, controlled, or kind of mothered by his wife.
That feeling of being infantilized again. Dr. Levin's point about men wanting to be heroes, not criticized.
That fits right in. Criticism is a huge discourager. So the advice is avoid mom talk.
Meaning?
Talking down to him, nagging. Instead, approach him with respect. Give him space if he needs it. Definitely don't use the silent treatment.
That seems counterproductive.
Totally.
Yeah.
And crucially, make it safe for him to say no, sometimes without facing anger or guilt trips.
Create that safety.
Yeah.
And the book gives actual phrases to use.
Yeah, ways to build him up, affirm his masculinity, make him feel genuinely appreciated. That can really boost his overall well-being, which often connects back to desire.
Okay, so assuming the engine is running, how do you keep it running? Maintaining intimacy long-term?
Right, keeping the engine running. The book points out the vulnerability that sets in when passion fades from a marriage.
Makes sense.
And Dr. Lehman notes again that a husband who feels happy, satisfied, sexually connected is often way more willing to go the extra mile in other parts of the marriage.
Like that appreciation loop we talked about earlier.
Exactly. And there's this idea that sometimes more sex leads to wanting more sex. It taps into that fundamental need for connection we all have.
So it takes conscious effort.
Absolutely. Making sexual intimacy a priority, a real commitment, like date night or managing finances. It needs intention.
Yeah.
And it suggests fun ways to do that.
Like the hot dog night.
Huh? Yeah. Proof that romance doesn't need a huge budget. Or leaving lipstick messages, planning little surprise moments, keeping that spark alive.
It really connects the daily stuff, love, respect to that sexual energy.
They feed each other. Which brings us to the flip side. Sex, pancakes, and what women want. Exploring female desire.
Starting with Becky's famous pancake fantasy.
Which is hilarious.
Yeah.
But also illustrates persistence in communicating desires, even quirky ones, until they're heard and fulfilled.
Finally got her pancakes. And Jackie's story.
Yeah, the spontaneous romantic evening, highlighting that desire for connection and intimacy outside the everyday routine.
And Lynette's simple fantasy, intimacy in the rain.
And her husband remembered and made it happen. It just shows how powerful it is when a partner truly listens and acts on those expressed desires, big or small.
And the book normalizes fantasies for women too, right? Not just men.
Totally. Encourages adventurousness within the bounds of marriage and mutual consent, of course. But the key, again and again, is communication.
Clear communication. That tart analogy.
So memorable. The idea that women sometimes just need to ask directly, maybe repeatedly, for what they want, including in the bedroom.
But it's also about creating space for him to share his desires too.
Absolutely. A safe space, free of judgment or shame, and focusing conversations on what you like, what feels good, rather than just listing complaints.
That story about Emily asking about oral sex before marriage seemed bold, but it underlines the need for those conversations about boundaries and desires early on.
Yeah, establishing what feels right and permissible for both partners within their own values. Even the Modern Family clip reference.
Right, showing how awkward moments can actually end up being sweet and connecting.
Exactly. And there's this idea, choosing cake, avoiding intimacy, often leads to regret later, whereas choosing connection rarely does.
That's a thought provoker.
The book really pushes back on seeing sexual connection as just indulgence. It frames it as a gift from God, something to be enjoyed.
And the author shares her own journey with that, from guilt to joy.
Yeah, moving from feeling guilt or shame, maybe from past experiences or messages she'd received, to embracing sex as a joyful, God-honoring part of her marriage after finding faith.
And dealing with lingering guilt.
Consciously clearing your mind, communicating openly with your husband about those feelings, not letting the past intrude on the present intimacy.
It all ties together in that final chapter, sexual and godly.
Yet, touching on the weight many husbands feel, the responsibility, Gary's quote about that.
In the marathon analogy, wives as cup holders.
Such a great visual. Husbands running the race of life, needing their wives as their primary support, their cheerleaders.
Being his biggest fan.
Exactly. And it talks about the long-term payoff of prioritizing your husband, even during those crazy kid years, how it impacts the next generation too.
Elizabeth Elliot's perspective is in there too, right? Appreciating the husband you have.
Yes, appreciating the man God gave you, even with his little quirks or annoyances, finding the good.
And that practice of turning negative thoughts into prayers of praise.
So powerful. Actively shifting your mindset, finding the magic in the ordinary, appreciating the small, everyday acts of love.
And it ends with that quote about honor and security leading to great sex.
From Dr. Gary Smalley and Ted Cunningham. That cultivating honor and security in the relationship itself is the bedrock. That's what naturally leads to great sex. It's a call to be the kind of woman your husband is proud and grateful to be married to.
Wow. Okay, so bringing it all together. A thriving, intimate life in marriage isn't just one thing. It's multifaceted.
Totally. It
Yeah.
needs that open, honest communication we started with. It needs addressing the hindrances, whether it's body image or past hurts,
Understanding each other's needs, desires, physical and emotional.
making that conscious effort to be attracted to each other, keeping things fresh.
And grounding it all in shared values. Maybe faith for some, that sense of partnership.
Exactly. Which leads us, I guess, to the final thought for you, the listener.
Yeah, something to mull over. What's maybe one small practical step you could take this week? Just one thing to deepen that connection with your spouse. Maybe open up a new conversation about intimacy.
You never know what surprising aha moment might just unfold when you take that one little step.